Hi all, Rick here. This video is one covering a starship from beta canon pretty much because I could not find something in universe that was of the same caliber as this class. The Eclipse Intel Cruiser. The ship was created for Star Trek Online as a spy ship and very much styled to look the part. Starfleet is quite unlikely to make vessels exactly like this, although they have done similar ships in the past. This is because of its mandate as an exploration-first organisation, and often that, quite simply, Federation sensor systems are therefore advanced enough to function as effective spy ships anyway. The Dudestat is a rather recent example of a craft designed to function well as a spy vessel, despite it technically being a sort of scout. In its past, Starfleet has commissioned things like the NCIA class for Section 31 and the Osler type, which both featured stealth technology, but these were mission-specific, smaller craft. So, the origin of the Eclipse is tied into the specific needs and unique circumstance of the Star Trek Online narrative, but if something similar were to arise in canon, it would be cool to see something like this emerge. With a basic overview, the Federation had recently uncovered a shortcut back into the Delta Quadrant, but didn't know what to expect. The return of a large Iconian threat was clear, and it was working behind the scenes to gather allies and proxy agents in preparation for an assault on the Alpha and Beta Quadrants. As such, Starfleet would be stepping into the Delta Quadrant to ascertain current events here after being out of contact with it for 32 years. So Operation Delta Rising was put into play, where the mobilisation of specific assets, individuals and technologies were to return to the Delta Quadrant. And yes, Voyager's former crew played a large role in this. The whole operation warrants its own video, but suffice to say, Starfleet needed a vessel that could operate for a long time in deep space, away from Federation outposts, and gather data across a wide range of topics to map out a political and physical landscape of an unclear situation. So the Eclipse class, among similar ships, was commissioned. The mission profile was for a ship that could spend months undetected roaming around and gathering information, a deep space long-term intelligence vessel, so everything about the Eclipse was built to support this. With the dissolution of the Romulan neutral zone and the rise of a more amiable Romulan government recognised by the Federation, cloaking devices were shared with Starfleet in limited supply, so one was provided. Activating the cloak, however, reduces its sensor range. The first vessel made was the USS Eclipse. The shape of the starship is deliberately narrow to reduce its sensor profile, and the hull is layered in scattering fields to disperse EM signatures. In addition to this, a layer of absorptive hull plating is there to not only aid in creating a sensor blind spot, but also disperse impacts. In terms of shield systems, it's actually pretty standard. Thanks to the narrow profile, the main deflector too is of unique design, again minimising detectability but maintaining the effective range. The ship was designed with the tried and true 4-nacelled warp coasting design, which allowed for longer high warp journeys by alternating the stress on the coils. But there is the additional tech at play here, namely a warp signature masking system, which mitigates the subspace profile generated by the vessel at warp. While not providing complete undetectability, it does drastically reduce the distance at which it can be detected while in warp. Its impulse engines are pretty standard, however it does have a trick up its sleeve to increase its manoeuvrability. Its structural integrity field can run a little more slack, and divert this to its engines for increased nimbleness. Their sensor systems are, as you'd expect, incredibly advanced. On par with most science ships, they can observe events passively or actively from great range and in high detail. The extensive sensor arrays and communications points are bolstered by fleets of replicable automated drones, which can be launched from 252 separate deployment tubes dotted across the hull. The sensor relays are then stored under a translucent shield to maintain the hull's low profile, but are visible in just how large and numerous they are. Under them are expansive passive sensor panels for receiving signals with specialised planetary sensors on the underside of the saucer. The solid, glowing blue strips are active scanners of high intensity. They can perform a penetrating scan of a target, gleaning a ton of information in seconds, and increase the effectiveness by linking in their numerous drones. This, of course, is not subtle, but it gets results and can be used in advance of a combat encounter to create an effective targeting solution. In terms of offensive abilities, it featured a structural integrity siphon system which acted as a sort of wireless sabotage of an opponent's own such systems, rendering them susceptible to more wear and tear from combat maneuvers than normal. The numerous weapons are also built into retractable or recessed hardpoints, again so as not to disrupt its profile. There are 4 phaser turrets, 2 above and 2 below, to supplement the main phaser arrays, of which there are quite a few, with 4 on top of the saucer, 3 under, and a whopping 16 placed around the nacelles for full coverage. These arrays have a distinct blue patterning to them, and may be designed to diminish the detectable discharge when firing and priming. There are 4 torpedo launchers, with 2 fore and 2 rear facing. At its launch, the class was joined by the Scryer and Phantom classes, which utilised many of the same technologies. The Phantom was smaller and more heavily armed, with phaser cannons, the idea being that it could do more than gather data, but act as a disruptive presence if needed, while the Scryer has a greater focus on specialised shielding systems, leading to more specialised deployment zones. Barely a year later, they were joined by the Kalian class cruiser, which is a little more developed in its lore and history, so I'll cover that one separately. But that covers the lore of the intelligence cruiser, the Eclipse, and its sister ships. It's a good premise for a vessel and a solid place in the fleet for such a class, the need to have a long-term deep space embedded asset that can continually observe and take the measure of a situation. The Starfleet could deploy numerous of these ships to different locations and leave them to operate independently for a long time, thereby able to report findings back to the Federation when Starfleet is ready to make a move onto a new frontier. It's a little less explory of them, but it makes sense if you're expecting a potentially hostile reception. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the Operation Delta Rising's Intel ships. Until the next video, I've been Rick, and I'll see you first. Goodbye.